Hi guys, how are you doing today? Hope you're all doing well. Can't believe it's October already. This year's gone very, very quickly. For the past few months now, I've been going through a kind of transition-like period in my life where I've been reflecting a lot on where I am currently in life, where I've been, where I would like to go from here. And I think, like most people who reach a certain age, you do naturally start to reminisce and reflect upon the things you've achieved, not achieved, and just kind of generally how you see yourself, how you feel in yourself. And you start pondering on how you ended up where you are and how you ended up becoming the person you are and why you seem to spiral into somebody and a life that you never thought you would end up with. And I think there just comes a point where you have to say to yourself, look, this is just not working. This is not working out. This is not healthy. It's not productive. It's not really benefiting me in any real meaningful sense. So change is inevitable. Change has to happen, whether you like it or not, no matter how difficult that change might be. You know deep down that you have to do something. And I've known for a good few years now that my current circumstances aren't fulfilling me anymore, they aren't pushing me. It's not a source of motivation, it's not a source of inspiration in any way. And I've just known, probably since COVID actually, since the pandemic, that I knew that being over here in Thailand and doing the teaching thing wasn't going to last forever. I've known that for probably a good 5 years or so. Probably even longer than that. And, yesterday I had a kind of a bit of a heart-to-heart with my other half, and we just said some things to each other that I think we both needed to hear, and we needed to get off our chests. Things that had kind of been there anyway for a very long time, but we just didn't want to talk about. We didn't want to have that emotional kind of, outpouring of truth. And, we've all been there. We've all had those difficult heart-to-hearts, whether it's with our friends or family or partners. And it's hard, it's very, very hard. It's hard to talk about things that are on your mind because, well, first of all, it's often surrounded by a lot of built-up emotion and, fear and, the worry of the consequences of what you're going to say. But I just think that in the end, there's just comes a point where somebody has to initiate that. Somebody has to start that conversation. So I'm not happy with certain things, and I need to do something to make myself feel more worthy of respect in myself and from other people. Now, I don't know about other men out there, but I certainly, from my own sort of just stance as a man, as a 35-year-old man, I feel like I have to have a certain degree of self-worth and respect in myself, let alone from other people. Because otherwise I feel like I'm wasting my life away. I feel like I'm not really living a life that is really bringing anything good to myself or those around me. And that's really where the decline in your self-worth disappears, when you no longer respect yourself, where you no longer feel like, not so much a man, but just as a mature adult. You don't feel like you're being something that you know you can be, because you've slid into years of kind of self-neglect and just letting depression kind of ride all over you like a tsunami, and just a general sort of sense that you've kind of just let yourself go, really. You've let yourself become bogged down with everything, and it's eating away at your confidence and your ability to get back up. It's not an easy, I have to admit, this is not an easy video to make, because it's essentially me kind of saying that really this is the end of a chapter, really. This is the end of a particular part of my life that I didn't really want. I don't know, I wanted it to end in some ways, but I also didn't want it to end. But there's always those conflicting thoughts and emotions that come with any major period of upheaval or any period of change or transition era. Am I making the right decision? Is this really what I want to do? What comes next? The fear of being alone, the fear of being judged, feeling like a failure, the shame and embarrassment, stigma attached to it, of having to go back to a situation that you didn't really want to go back to, but you have to move forwards, kind of thing. And it's just, my life's always been like that. It's a few steps forward, 10 steps back, period of stagnation, a couple of steps forward, 10 steps back. But I just think in the end that I just no way that I could continue living the way that I've been living here for too much longer. It's just been slowly killing me, if I'm honest. It really has. I just couldn't see myself. There was just no way that I could go back into the things that, as much as I would like to sit here and tell you that my life here is wonderful and great, it's like most people's lives. It's complicated. It's a mixed bag of things. There are great things. There are good things. There are, to be honest with you, kind of awful parts about living here sometimes, and annoying, really irritating things. But that applies anywhere you live, I suppose, in the world. You can't have it all your own way, and life isn't perfect. Societies aren't perfect. Cultures aren't perfect, and certainly people aren't. And so you find yourself having to navigate around a lot of things over here, and because of the prevalence of the saving face culture, you kind of almost end up having to adopt a certain kind of persona or image facade of yourself when you're out in public, because especially around people that you don't particularly, I mean, that's kind of universal, but I think it's harder here because at least in the Western world there's a kind of accepted degree of like passive aggressiveness, and like it's kind of like the way we do things to some extent, like rather than having conflicts and arguments. Generally speaking, we tend to use humour or sarcasm, or we try to usually try to find a way of laughing at each other in somewhere, whether that's laughing with you or at you, that's a whole other thing. But I think in the West, I think we have a bit more variety in the way we deal with things, whereas over here it really is primarily just saving face at all costs. And sometimes you just don't know quite how to handle yourself. I think you don't know where you fit in with everything, and I don't know. I just kind of got really pissed off with I suppose grew resentment over time over here, because there's just such a exuberance of overly just over the top, exaggerated drama and humour to things, but it's very subtle. There's a lot of what I'm trying to say here. There's just a lot of superficiality over here. There's a lot of surface level stuff, and I just think for somebody like myself, I just don't think that this is the place that I want to be in anymore, if I'm honest. As much as the UK is falling apart and it's definitely getting worse over there, I still think that there is some hope for that country. You have to believe that there's some hope anyway, because that's all I've got left. That's all I have at this point. Is I have to hope that there's something better than my current circumstances. I think it's just that over time you mature and you start to realise that you just are who you are, and no amount of adjusting and being flexible and trying to adapt is going to make any difference. And actually, in the end, the more you do that, the more it just eventually comes around to bite you on the arse at some point. It just comes back to haunt you. It makes you feel like you can't be your authentic self. You can't be who you really are, and so I just think in the end you just have to say to yourself at a certain point in life, it's maybe this is just who I am. It's you can live in denial all you want. You can pretend that everything will work out and everything's going to be great, but I just think that there comes a point in one's life where you just have to sit around and admit to yourself that the life's basically shit, and it's not what you want anymore. It's not driving you. It's not pushing you towards anything. It's not uplifting anymore. It's not empowering you in any way. It's just comforting. It's just comfortable. It's predictable. It's familiar. It's just a pattern of living. It's a cycle of patterns and habits and of course it's important to have some level of comfort in your life, because you can't live without comfort. You need to have comfort. But I think that you have to be so careful, because you can find yourself being more drawn in by comfort and convenience. And eventually it just eats you up. It eats your life away, because you get so stuck in it. And then over time, the less you do that pushes you out of that comfort zone, the more you want to stay in it, because it gets harder to leave it. Yeah, I suppose you could see it as a kind of addiction. It is a kind of addiction. It's over-reliance on something, because you can't face other parts of your life. And there may very well be good reasons for that. There may very well be a lot of history, a lot of baggage that you carry around with you. Sometimes you don't always know just how much, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the subconscious mind, and there's just you know when you need to change. You just know it. You know deep down in yourself, as much as it's incredibly. It's hard. It's hard to admit that you're that things aren't working. It's hard to be brave enough to say that, and it's hard to admit to other people in that context, that situation, that isn't working for you anymore. And that's why I think in the end, that's why I had to remove myself from certain situations, certain people, because it just wasn't. And I assume probably that that applies to other people concerning me, and it's okay. I get it now. I understand. I've grown up. I've evolved a bit over the years. As you would expect, and matured. And I've had to accept that. I think honestly, most of the time, over the last sort of 15 years or so. Well, parts of the last 15 years, I've made a lot of major mistakes. I was too stubborn. I was too overwhelmed by my own insecurities. I was too overwhelmed by. I honestly, probably a lot of the time, feeling inadequate, feeling incompetent, and feeling just constantly having this impostor syndrome bothering me all the time, and in the end, that's partly why I decided to kind of step back from the traditional way of ESL teaching, TEFL teaching, TESL teaching, EFL, whatever you want to call it. I just think in the end, I was just the odd one out, really. It just didn't work. I couldn't maintain a certain level of enthusiasm and energy that was required constantly, daily, for 7 or 8 hours. Just thinking about it now, it's just exhausting. It's exhausting all the time. And I'm not just talking about physical exhaustion. I can deal with that, but it's the psychological and emotional toil of it, day after day after day. When you've already got mental health problems anyway, when you're already struggling with your own identity, your own depths of introversion, introspection, and your own degrees, I guess, of trauma and various types of baggage. I think it's one thing when you're extroverted and I think more naturally drawn towards this sort of like facade of being a kind of entertainer, if you like, because that's essentially what a lot of it comes down to really over here. It's about entertainment. It's about giving a performance more than it is about the effectiveness of learning. I would say I don't know. I just felt that for me it just wasn't something that was sustainable in the end. Yeah, I've mentioned it I think on a few videos on my channel over the last few years, but I've now made the decision that I will no longer be continuing with that, and I say that with certainty because I will be now heading back to the UK in probably February, March next year. Certainly sometime before April anyway, because that's when my visa expires. So, and I won't be renewing it. So, it's just a decision that I've decided to come to. It's not just purely myself. My and my partner, we talked about it last night, and there are a lot of reasons why. Partly it's because I think it would just have been a mistake for me to try and take on another position here, knowing full well that it just wouldn't have worked. There's a reason I stepped back from the whole classroom thing. So years ago, and there's a reason why I've gradually pushed a lot of work away because I just couldn't cope anymore. I was just finding myself just, before every lesson having to kind of like hype myself up and like tell myself I can do this, and you know something's wrong when you know something is not working, something is broken in you, something's you're trying to do something that your body's fighting against. When when something's gone wrong, because most people don't have to do that. It's like, it's one thing to go on a stage and sing or perform or something like that, especially if it's something you like really enjoy. Then you can kind of like tolerate those nerves and things because you're doing something you enjoy. You're doing something that you're naturally drawn to anyway. Like, you actually have a passion for it. But when it's something that you don't enjoy and never really truly have enjoyed, and it's always been a struggle for you, it's always been a constant battle of trying to it's essentially really it's a part of, to me, the whole thing is, it's just inauthentic, and it's too seeped with Americanism and like corporatism and all that kind of crap, and it's just too, as they say, edutainment. It's too much about keeping up appearances and smiling and laughing, and that's all good and well, if it's something you enjoy, or if you've got kids of your own, it's like. But I think partly because I don't have any children, because of the way I am as a person, and just because the fact that it just wasn't the right fit for me. It just wasn't something that I felt was right for me in all sorts of different ways. To me, it makes sense for me to just call it a day and say, look, I've got to draw a line under that. There's just no point going on. There's no point continuing pretending that things are going to work out, because I know they're not. So I'm not going to sit here and lie to myself for another 5-10 years or something. It's like, I don't have time. I'm already in my mid-30s. I'm going to be, as I keep saying in every single video I seem to make these days, I'm heading very swiftly towards 40. It's going to be 2026 before I know. I'll be 30. I'll be 36 within a few months. By the time I get back to the UK within a few weeks, I'll be 36. It's like, that in and of itself is a motivator. The fact that I'm almost 40 years old. My parents are approaching their mid-60s now. My older brother's going to be 40 in a few years. My youngest brother just had his 30th birthday. My sister's going to be 30 in a few years. It's like, it's just that concept, that real, like Judge's hammer type kind of like impact in the head. It's like, you haven't got time. You just haven't got time. You've got to sort your life out. You've got to do something, David. You've got to make a change. I know it's going to be heartbreaking, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be sad. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be lonely. It's going to be difficult to make a change, but what options do you have? Do you either stay as you are and continue to be miserable, or at least take a chance? Take a chance and see if something comes out of it. And that's why I'm at. That's kind of my justification for it. It's like, well, I've not really got anything, got nothing to lose really. I'm going back to the country that I was born in anyway. I don't have to do all the bullshit visa stuff every so many months, or all the bureaucracy of it all every year, and hoping that they're going to give you a visa. And I think just over time, a lot of things just really, I didn't truly realise it until recently, just how much everything was really dragging me down, and because of that, I just felt miserable. I felt unhappy. I felt discontented. I just felt. I just felt like I wasn't being somebody I would like to be. And on top of that, you're just expected to go into your role and constantly happy all the time. And I just think I just snapped at a certain point. I just can't take any more of it. I just can't take another second of it. I can't. I've really have tried. I really, you have no idea. I really have tried to stick it out, and I just felt I just couldn't do it anymore. I just can't take any more of it. I've done it all, practically. Okay, yeah, I'll get on the plane feeling like a failure, but you know what? At least I won't be as hopefully if something's got to plan back in the UK, I can at least say, well, okay, I wasn't a success story in Thailand or anything, but what does it matter? It doesn't matter what the past is the past. What have you done in the past? Like, who cares? It's, the present is the only thing that really matters, I would say, in many ways. What about the potential of you now? And who cares what you did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Who cares? That was then. What about now? What about the version of you living in reality, in the real world, and the present today? Are you really happy with things? It's like, what's going on in your life? Why do you seem like to be apathetic, and you don't seem to want to do anything anymore? Why don't you want to change? And it's because you can't see your way out, and you haven't accepted I think it's that you're still living in that denial stage, and that's what came to me. I've just been living in denial for so long. A mixture of denial and comfort, toxic comfort, you could say. Wanting to try to convince myself that I can do this, I can, it'll all work out over here, and it just won't. It just won't work out. Not as things currently stand, they wouldn't have worked out, because even if I'd taken a job here, I don't know what it is with me. Every time I make a video, I wasn't saying something that doesn't make sense, using the wrong word. It's because I'm under pressure. I feel under pressure. But, I would have essentially have taken a job that, let's face it, I'm no bloody, Oxford Dictionary buff or anything. It's like, I know some, I know the basics of grammar and, English writing structure and, setting theories and models behind, the English language and, the importance of vocabulary building and sentence structure and etc. I know some primitive, basic stuff. But, I'm certainly not an expert. But I didn't come here as a professor of languages or anything. I just came here as somebody that, at the time, was just desperate to get out. Desperate to. I was 24 when I left, or 25 when I left. No, 24. Sorry. And I was a young man then, and but things change. Times move on, and you get older, and your priorities shift, and I never really used to believe that stuff, but it's so true. You don't realise the trueness of what people actually say to you. You just kind of, it goes in one ear and goes out the other, but you don't really take it on board until you've actually lived it. You've gone through it and you think, oh yeah, that is actually true. Really true. And so what would have ended up happening would have been that I would have taken a job that I didn't want. To work 5 or 6 days a week. It's not uncommon for people to work 6 days a week over here as well. Some people work pretty much every single day for months without a break. Respect to those people. Or maybe I shouldn't give them respect. They're just fucking idiots. I don't know, but whatever. I don't know. I think in the end, I think it all really just depends on what your definition of success is. What would you deem to be a success? How would you see yourself as a success? How would you define your own success? How would you like to be remembered? How would you like to look back on your life? It matters. Your legacy matters to some extent. Because you can't. You've only got so many years ahead of you. At some point, all that will be left of you is your legacy. And we all know that. None of us are getting out of this. That is the inevitable consequence of being born. As paradoxical as it is. But all that would have happened is I would have took a job that I didn't want, I didn't like, and as I said to my partner yesterday, it would have been a matter of time before it would have terminated, or I would have had my contract terminated, or I just kind of resigned or whatever. And I don't know. I just know. I know in the back of my mind that I just have that. Sometimes you just have to listen to your intuition. You just have to listen to your gut instinct and really just take a hold of it. So, because that's the thing is, we can spend years living in denial. We can spend years caught up in the fear of change. Some people, it can last decades. People stay in unhappy situations all the time, whether it's with a source of employment, with toxic friends, with a toxic partner, shit financial situation, whatever it is. And that can go on for years. So many people right now, you've no idea the things they're going through. Sometimes it's easy. It's very easy to look around you, or even especially on social media, and sit there and compare yourself to people and think, I wish I had their life, but you don't. That's showing you that's just a very small part of someone's life. That's the best parts of someone's life, but you don't see all the other stuff behind it. You don't truly. I don't think you would really want to be most people. Honestly, especially if you knew the complete reality of what it's like to be them, and that their lives and their stories and the things that they're dealt with and are dealing with. So I think it's very easy to look over, it's like, it's that kind of things, it's that kind of thing of, just not seeing what's right in front of you, like just not wanting to, just wanting to see something that you want, wanting to see what fits your level of mental comfort. It's like believing what you want to believe because it's the easiest thing to do. It's the less conflicting, it's the less nuisance of a thing to connect with. I think I've done a lot myself. It's easy to look at people over here that you think are successful. They've got a good, decent job in an international school, or they're kind of involved in some kind of corporate like chain or something, whatever. And I just think in the end, like for me, I accept that I caused myself a lot of problems. I'm not going to sit here and say it's everybody else's fault, because it wasn't. I self-sabotaged. But I think in the end, honestly, I think it's actually all for the best. And because I think all of that stuff basically cemented my belief anyway, and whether it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, I don't whatever, but I just think in the end, in my heart, I know that this is not the life that I know I can't continue to live like this anymore. I can't do it. I can't continue with no job or very little work, very little money, kind of always being at the mercy of your immigration office or officer. And it's all going well when you're in your youth, when you're still young, and especially if you've got friends over here and stuff like that, it makes it more interesting, makes it more fun. But I think as you get older, I would say, I don't know. I think it really just depends on your person's situation. But I would say if you've got no family over here, if you've got no real friends over here, unless you make some expat friends, it's not really going to be a very fulfilling experience for you. And I'm just kind of naturally a bit of a loner anyway. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I like talking to people. I can spend time around people. But I think once I feel that sense of where am I in this whole bullshit thing of like the pecking order and what's my status in this group, and whose loyalties do I have, or whose loyalties am I meant to have, who's really my friend in this group. It's just someone that's naturally a deep thinking, and be a bit anxiety prone. I just find that for me, I don't make friends very easily. I have serious problems with trusting people. What a surprise! I hear you say. Yeah. I think just some people just kind of look at me as you're such an energy fucking vampire, or you're such a Debbie Downer, you're such this, you're such that. So, well, if you would have walked in my shoes for the past 35 years, you would end up like this as well. You would sound like me. You would have the barriers up against making friendships and going into things that you see. The thing is, in the end, it's not just so much about the specific job that bothers me about staying over here. It's the fact that it's this thing of you flinch under pressure, you flinch under stress, and under the weight of the saving face culture and all the office politics and dramas and all the resentments and bitterness from people. And you can just smell it. It's like alcohol. You can just smell it. It's just, and I'm sure they can smell my insecurities as well. It's like I don't sit here as someone that thinks he's above everybody else. I'm just as fucked up as everybody else. I'm just as fucking lost and confused and broken as most people. But I think, but at least I'm aware of it. At least I have that self-awareness that allows me to say, yeah, it is what it is. I'm not just living out a miserable existence and not knowing why. And you might be thinking, I'm sure some people might think, well, what's really the problem, Dave? It's like you live in Thailand, an exotic part of the world. It's like you're married. What's the problem? Well, the problem of course is me, isn't it? It's not necessarily Thailand or teaching necessarily. It's just me and how I feel. I just feel like I don't fit in here. I don't fit into the constant over the top levels of energy and enthusiasm and drama that accompany this society, this culture in many respects. And just that it's just kind of very superficial. As I said, it's just a very kind of a false place, actually. It's people aren't what you think they are. As I already just mentioned, saving face norm of people not wanting to lose respect in their social circles and be perceived as being lower or less than in some way, or also the not wanting to confront ugly, difficult truths and And so I just felt in the end that basically I'm not going to find over here the kind of people that I need for me to have a more interesting life, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I just realized that I was trying to convince myself that I could do it, I could be something that I'm not. So it's not even really about the countries. It's not even just so much about the external world. It's more of me. It's more of like, what's wrong with me? What's going on with me? Why is that causing me problems out there in the real world? It's because I suppose part of me doesn't really know who I am still. You know, I've gone through this kind of existential phase for the past few years. You know, I'm kind of naturally I guess a bit more depressive, a bit more kind of moody than maybe some people are. I don't mean to be, that's just kind of who I am, you know. And, you know, you don't have to like that, you don't have to be around me, you know, you don't have to listen to me. But that's who I am. I'm not going to sit here and apologise for it because that is just who I am. You know, I've realised that. You know, this is who I am as a person, just as you are who you are. And that doesn't mean you can't tweak certain things here and there, but I think overall you just kind of who you are. You are who you are at a certain point in your life, unless you start to make some big changes, in which then you can, you know, maybe push yourself a bit more than you would have normally done. At least take a chance. And you see, that's the thing in life, is we're so cowardly, you know, we get so, you know, we grab onto anything that gives us comfort, that gives us a sense of safety and stability in life, and often we don't realise that those are the very things that are holding us back. They're the things that are breaking us slowly. We don't see it because it happens progressively. You know, we get comfortable being in comfort, and as a result of that, you know, nothing changes. We don't evolve, we don't mature, we stop, you know, over time we stop doing things, we stop going out, you know, we stop trying things, we stop making an effort. And that then obviously has major impacts on those around you, because they notice it affects them, you know, impacts upon their relationship with you and their mood when they're around you. And I think sometimes, you know, the best thing you can do is just to say, I'm the problem here. I need to work on myself. I need to have some time to figure out what's broken and why it's broken, and work my way back up somehow in this world in some way, even if it's just small steps. You know, if it takes 5, 10 years, whatever it is, then I just think at the end of the day, you have to make that change. You have to say, this part of my life's over. It's finished. It's gone. It died years ago. It's, you know, it's been dying a slow, painful death for years. And because you got comfortable, part of it, because of that stopped you from making that, from wanting to admit it, wanting to make the change. So in the end, all you do is just kind of I think for most people, delay the inevitable. And that is at some point, either you or somebody else will do something, say something, and that will be the final straw. And I think last night, we didn't have an argument or anything. It was a very civilised discussion, actually, one we should have had years ago, if I'm being honest. You know, it was just a really kind of a normal conversation. It's just that we just got some things off our chest that we needed to get off, and just started being real with each other. We're saying, you know, Dave, you know, you've got to do something. You've got to sort yourself out, because your life's in a mess. And she's right, it is. But I already knew that. You know, I already knew that things had spiraled out of control, and that, you know, it was impacting our marriage and it impacted my work. That's why I don't have any real work anymore, because I stopped. I just couldn't deal with it anymore because I was so caught up in everything. I was just burnt out, I guess. I don't really know whether that's the right word really, but I just felt like I just didn't have any energy, kind of, I'd say, a lot of the time, especially with work. I just saw it as like, it was just such a huge burden. It was so, I just didn't feel like, I don't know, burnout just seems a bit dramatic for my liking, but I can't really think of any other way to put it. It was more like a kind of just like a slow burn. It wasn't some like dramatic thing that happened overnight. It was just a gradual progression of, I don't want to do this no more. I am hating every second of it. I'm not a naturally exuberant, buoyant, positive, happy, optimistic person anyway. And in a job, a career, especially over here anyway, I don't know what it's like in other parts of this region, or Asia or wherever in the world, but it tends to be, a lot of it's down to entertainment, and for that you have to put on I'm just not very good at putting on a brave face. I'm not very good at hiding what's really going on beneath the surface, and that causes problems in the workplace. If and you stand out, and people know that, people know, people can smell that kind of thing. It's like blood in the water, like sharks. They're just naturally drawn to it, because I think people are naturally drawn towards things that they want to know about, because they don't know. People get nosy because they also kind of maybe enjoy the work to some extent, but kind of find it dull and boring, and so anything else that's happening is more interesting. So it's I think it's natural for people to be curious and to kind of pick up on things, even if they don't know. Some people think they know what's going on, but they don't really. And yeah, I don't know. I just felt that I just felt over time that nothing I was going to do was really going to matter, was really going to make a difference, was really good. And I think just genuinely, I just felt like I was wasting my life away. It wasn't, nothing positive was coming out of this. I didn't have a regular teaching schedule anyway. And that's not just that, you just never really know over here whether you're going to have your contract renewed. The summer, and the thing is, all this summer camp things, that's basically just a kind of practical, like contract renewal assessment, basically. And I just saw through all of that stuff, all of the pretentiousness and corporatism, fuels kind of structure of it all, and just all the drama and all the bullshit and just garbage in the schools with management and agencies trying to take a piss, and you're getting paid peanuts for essentially working your ass off all day now, and you always end up getting dragged into things that have got nothing to do with you as well. And I got tired of that, and people taking the piss because you're the new guy. And so I just felt that I just was trying to. I just got tired of feeling like I had to wear a suit all the time, like I had to constantly be fucking brimming with excitement and happiness all on my face. As soon as you walk, for the next fucking 8 hours, you basically got to have a constant smile on your face. And the moment you're not smiling, they're sitting there, sort of like quietly, seething with resentment anyway, because they know you get paid more than they do. But also just seething because because they're seething because either you actually are happy in that moment, or you're not being happy enough. It's like you just can't win. It's like they get off on all that. They'll never admit it, but a lot of the Thai staff over here, especially in government schools, they get off on all that sort of like, sort of like subtle, sort of mild, sort of like sadism almost, you could call it. It's like they get off on seeing you suffer, they get off on seeing you miserable, and knowing you can't say anything, you can't do anything. And that's that as well, that lack of empowerment over here. It's, you do one thing or you say something and you're pretty much finished. Yeah, they'll say it's a warning, but it's like they've already kind of, it's like you step one foot out of line over here, you say something honest and true that needs to be brought up in the school because something's not working, whether it or something, it's just, one of the kids is out of control, you've put something on the report that they don't like, they don't agree with. So it's all about keeping up appearances. It's all it's all smoke and mirrors over here. And as far as I'm concerned, this place fucking sucks. In many ways, not all, but in many ways, this place is massively overrated. I don't really know why it's that popular anyway, to be honest with you. There's far better places to go. And I'm sorry to say that, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I'm just being honest about it. I would probably say Vietnam probably, maybe even Laos to some extent. I'd say probably Malaysia, even is somewhat better. Yeah, maybe stricter in some ways, but I just think more genuine, more real. I think people seem a bit more down to earth and a bit more kind of just come across a bit more authentic to me than a lot of people do here, because that whole thing of the land of smiles is so true. You don't know what people are smiling at you about or for. It's nothing. It's probably just habit more than anything else. It's just some people might say, "Oh, why do you always see why are you always so negative? Why do you see all the negatives and things?" I don't. I'm just saying that, I'm seeing what I see as the truth. What I see as the most important things to point out, the things that matter, not all the superficial, surface level crap that a lot of people talk about. I like to talk about the things that I feel matter to me. Because the thing is, in that line of work, basically, people try and devalue you. There's a lot of that pecking order bullshit going on in ESL. It's like, you're always, as soon as you go into a new place, you're getting tested, you're getting subtly judged and criticised by people that have been there a while, and they feel threatened by your existence because you're the new guy. You're the new popular one for the next couple of weeks or months. And so that takes the attention away from people that already feel like they're kind of invisible anyway. So there's all that kind of crap going. There's just so many layers to this shit. I could spend hours sitting here talking about all of the crap that I saw in my time in schools and just dealing with parents and out of control, rebellious, spoiled, entitled little shits that some of these kids are over here. Sorry to say, but it's the truth. I have touched about the whole. I did actually make quite an in-depth video about the ESL thing a while back. You can find it on my channel if you scroll back a couple of months, I think I made it this year. So I would say that in the end, I just had to admit, as much as it was difficult for me to admit it, I had to just say, look, I can't. There's no point in me getting another job here. It wouldn't last. And eventually, I would just end up resenting the place, and I would probably kind of end up resenting my wife because of it. And I don't want to do that. It's not her fault. So I just think it's really, in the end, it's for everybody's benefit for me to not go down that route, which is it's difficult to admit because it makes me feel like a failure. It makes me feel like you couldn't make it in the world of ESL. It's like, well, you're never going to make it anywhere. That kind of shit kind of going on, and it's not so much I couldn't do it. I just didn't want to do it in the end. I just felt that I just couldn't take it. I just couldn't take it anymore. Both in the schools and then with the private stuff in the end, I just got really tired of it. I just got to a point where my body was there saying, like, crying out for change, crying out for something else, something different, something new, even if it means having to go back to my own country. It's like, at least there's more opportunities there than here to work. You've got a chance to go and study something if you want to. You've got your family there, and it's like I've got nothing over here apart from my wife and my dogs. That's it. That's all I have. I don't know anybody here. I don't have any friends. I don't hang out with anybody at the weekends or anything like that. And that's been the case for years now. There was a time, not too long before COVID happened where, I was kind of still going out and, I was, 29 then? So really over the last 5-6 years, really, I think honestly, I kind of started to become maybe a little bit more kind of antisocial, whatever you want to call it, just not feeling digging the kind of socialising thing anymore or being around people in general. Around about the age of 27, I think. I think probably part of me was, and looking back on it now in hindsight, I think that's really where my gradual existential crisis stuff started to come up to the surface. It was around about the age of 27, 28. And, this is not going to be an easy thing. I must tell you that this is not going to be an easy thing to deal with when I have to, I think a couple of months from now, pack my bags and go back to the UK and face the realities of what life's like there at the moment, and having to live and probably go and live with one of my family members, having to either train or go to college or try and get some kind of a job somewhere. I know it's going to be difficult. I know it's going to be probably a bit of a ball ache, actually, and there's no guarantee of anything. But at the same time, what are my options over here? What do I do? Do I stay here and continue to get involved with the teaching thing? But seriously, how long is that going to last? And I think over time, I would only end up regretting it, because I know deep down that's not what I want to do. That's not what I enjoy. I'm not passionate about it. I don't really care about it. And to me, I just think there's more important things to do for me elsewhere. I think my future, my potential probably is in the UK in some capacity or other, as much as it pains me to say that, because I do like certain aspects of living in Thailand. I certainly do have, at times, not always, but at times, a relatively good quality of life over here. Going home, that means I have more responsibility, I have more accountability, but I think those are the things that I've needed. Those are the things that I have to have. I have to feel like I'm doing something with my life. I have to feel like I'm heading towards something, making a difference, doing something that I'm satisfied with. We all have moments where we're unhappy in our jobs, and you start kind of questioning. But when that then goes on for weeks, months, years, you just know that it's not right for you. Your body's just telling you, it's just shouting out. The alarm bells are going off, and it's just telling you. It's just saying, you've got to get out. You've got to get out, David. You've got to leave. And I'm sure other people out there are going through similar things right now. I'm in very unhappy, difficult, challenging circumstances at work, maybe with a close friend, in their own marriages or in partnerships. And you all know that you have to face up to it. And I think that's the hardest thing to do, is to face up to the fact that you have to walk away now from a situation that's comfortable, that's familiar, and you don't know what's coming next. You have to take a gamble and say, I don't know what the future is, but I know that I have to try. I have to try and do something different. I have to go a different direction in life now. I remember, I think it was in I don't know if it was in secondary school or college. I think it was secondary school. There was a teacher there that retired, and not retired, she was moving on to another school somewhere in the area, I think. I don't know, she might have been moving out of town. I can't remember exactly what was that. I can't remember all the details of it, but I just remember there was a teacher somewhere, I think it was in secondary or high school, and yeah, I just remember all the students crying and things like that. And it might have been in year 9 or year 10. So that would have been at 04 or 05 time. And I said college, it must have been secondary school. Yeah, so she obviously left for some reason. You know, it's like sometimes you wonder like that, don't you, when people leave jobs that they've had for, you know, for years, and what's led to that, and I wonder how much shit they put up with, how much stuff they tolerated all the time, and sometimes I just find myself thinking about that. You know, it's like, why did I tolerate so much? Why did I put up with so much? It's because I didn't have any other way out of it at the time. There was I didn't feel like there was a way out, not a way out that I could tolerate. And that's the thing, is in the end, I just feel now that I have an existence that I can't tolerate anymore. My psychological state is damaged. My emotional state is all over the place, admittedly. And you know, my life has just basically come to a halt. I've basically ran out of money, ran out of energy, ran out of resilience, and I got tired of feeling a bit like a burden. I've gotten really deeply depressed about that, and the fact that I feel like a failure, and feeling like I've fucked up everything, and how the fuck am I going to get out of this? How am I going to turn my life around? What am I going to do now? You know, I'm going to go home probably for at least a few years, and have to try and sort my life out. You know, what does that mean for my relationship? You know, how will it survive? You know, I don't know. How's that going to work? See, one thing if it's just a few months apart, but when you're talking about years, you know, I don't know where I'm going to be 5 years from now, where my mind's going to be, you know, or if I might end up happening to meet someone. You know, I don't know. And so there's always that thing of what ifs, and what if this happens, what if that happens, and you know, that constant anxious state of just worrying about all the hypotheticals. But at least you can think about them. At least you know that there's a possibility of something new happening, something different happening. Whereas, you know, in your current situation, nothing's changed for the past 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, however long it's been. And nothing is changing. Nothing will change, because you don't have the mechanisms anymore, because you let yourself get bogged down with life, or couldn't find ways of dealing with it. That's led you to a point now where, you know, you basically you don't recognize yourself anymore. You don't feel right. You don't seem to act right. You don't seem to want to do anything anymore, whether it's exercising, spending time with your friends, your family, going outside, going to whatever it is you normally would do. Call it a breakdown, if you will, you know, call it, what was it called? Ahedonia. You know, call it eternal apathy, call it deep depression, if you like, call it an existential crisis of sorts. But you all will eventually, if you haven't already, come to a stage, whether it's in your 30s, whether it's in your 40s, 50s, beyond, or maybe even in your 20s. You know, we're not all straight off fresh off the belt of some factory, are we? We're all different. We all come to different things at different times for all sorts of reasons. Some people mature earlier than others, some people later on, some people develop more self-awareness younger than others. So yeah, there's no one size kind of fits all type of kind of thing to this, but there will come a point where you have to say, shit's not working. Why is it not working? What do I have to do to change things? And if I can't change things, because my body wants to do something else, my mind wants to do something else, then you will have to come up with a plan to get out of that situation. You'll have to find a way to move on, to move forward, to move towards something that strips all of that misery away from you, or at least some of it. Because life's only going to get more difficult and complicated with every passing decade. The closer you get towards meeting your own mortality, the worse you will feel about your life if you don't make the changes that you know you have to make. You know deep down, you know that there are serious issues within yourself. But only you can make that choice, can reach that point in your life where you say, I'm gonna have the courage and the honesty and the self-respect to say, this is not the life I want anymore. I think only when you can reach that genuine point in which you accept that something has to give, something has to change, otherwise you're going to regret it 30, 40 years down the line, even 10, 25 years down the line. But the older you get, the more you'll regret it. The longer you wait, the more you're going to hate yourself for not making that change. And again, there's no guarantee anything. There's no certainty to anything. Change is a gamble, isn't it? It's a sacrifice. You don't know how things are going to happen. It might end up that you end up in a worse situation, perhaps, or maybe you end up in a better one all the time. And sometimes it takes a lot of self-reflection and honesty to say that there's no promise of things getting better here. Certainly not in the short term. And so you have to. Your only option is to turn around and face yourself in the mirror and say, you can't go on playing this character anymore. You can't go on playing this version of yourself that other people as well as yourself know is not who you are, and it's affecting your interactions. It's affecting everything and everyone around you. It's not that people don't care. People want you to be happy, I think. Certainly some people do. Decent people do, anyway. But but we have to remember that they've got their own stuff. They might be going through their own transition stage of this is not happening anymore. This is not working. I don't feel right. I don't feel like I'm really happy anymore. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know how their lives have panned out. People only show you what they want you to show you. That's all it is. So I have to go home. I have to go back to my own country and somehow try to establish some kind of a job or a career of some sorts. Given that I haven't been in the country for, give or take almost a decade. That's not hard. That's not an easy thing to confront. To say, I didn't make it over here. I'm not a success story. I'm a nobody that found himself in circumstances that he partly got himself into and stayed into because he couldn't get out of them, because he didn't have the means to get out of it. So he's stuck in it, and he felt stagnant and became resentful and bitter and unhappy and miserable about it until the point where he could leave it. But of course, there's always that fear of, well, how do I know that I'm not going to fall into this trap again when I go into the next place, the next stage of my life? And of course you don't know that. You don't know. But at the very least, you have the opportunity where you are now, you know that the circumstances aren't going to provide you with opportunities to change your life around in some way, whatever that part of your life is that you feel isn't enough, not adequate enough, not good enough, that you need to change. You know that you have to do something, whether it's leaving your town, your city, looking in new places for work, moving to a different part of the country or moving abroad maybe, if you can do that, ditching certain people, trying to find new friends, moving into a new part of the town, whatever, changing jobs, changing hobbies, trying new things. And that's kind of what's bothered me for so long, is that sense of that I just felt like I'd become a really hollow individual. I didn't have anything to say much. I didn't really have anything going on in my life. I had no hobbies really. I had nobody to talk to anymore. And so I just sank into this pity of self-pity and just a kind of pit of despair and like apathy and just really horrible shit, like just really nasty, dark, horrible stuff that I feel sorry for you if you're going through it, because I know what it's like. It's really not very pleasant. So I have to now confront the future, whatever that is. I have to face up to the fact that I didn't make it over here, not necessarily because I'm failed, but just because I've realised that I couldn't continue to act out, to feel like I couldn't see myself being an actor. I couldn't see myself playing a role anymore. That at one time I could kind of tolerate, I think, but as I've gotten older, I don't have the patience for it anymore. I don't have the resilience. I don't have the energy anymore for certain things, and I don't have to. As you get older, you realise, there's so much bullshit in this world that you don't have to. You have to get yourself caught up in, and you don't have to. You just certain things you just really don't. You don't have to do that. If you want to do it, then you do it. Be my guest, but realise that you do have some control. You do have some decision power. You do have some degree of autonomy and flexibility to try and gain something back, to pull something back of yourself you used to have. There's a version of yourself that you used to be proud of, that you used to be happy about, a version you liked being, even if there were problems. Because I think, honestly, I kind of liked myself, I would say at the most, somewhere between my early to mid-20s. I think that was probably the best version of me, in some ways anyway. But obviously I was less knowledgeable, less wise than I am now, but that comes with age and experience. But I think, just for the last few years, I've just felt like and just like I kind of lost my sense of identity. I lost my sense of purpose and meaning in this world, my place, what was I supposed to, just that thing of, what am I supposed to be doing here? Why am I here? What am I doing? What should I be doing? Like, where should I be heading towards? So I think it's as much about change as it is about being lost, really. It's being confused about yourself, about, just kind of that. It's just that, we live so much of our lives, stuck in denial and thinking things are going to get better. And so, if only this happens, if only that happens, I'll be okay, I'll be happy. And I think a lot of time when people say they're content with their lives, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think they're just saying, I've just come to a place where I know I'm basically done now, and that's it. I'm just gonna accept it, just become kind of defeatist, I suppose, and I've been there, I've done it myself, did it for years. But I also think that you still at least have a chance. Whether you succeed or fail or not is a different matter, but at least you have the ability to take potentially open a new door to your life, start a new chapter, do something new, meet new people, be more in an environment that you think is better for your mental health, that you think is more authentic, that is more closer to who you are as a person, a place that you connect with, a place that matters to you, a place where you feel, for the most part, that you can be yourself compared to other places. Now, of course, nowhere's perfect. No city, no country, no continent is perfect. There are problems everywhere. There are issues with society, culture, people in general, everywhere you go. But I think if your current present situation is even more problematic, more stressful, more existential crisis inducing, then maybe it's better for you to go back to someone that's less of those. But then again, you don't always know. You don't know how you're going to be when you go to the next place. You don't know how you're going to evolve and mature or change. So again, you can't. Nobody has a crystal ball here. Nobody can tell you where you're going to go, what's going to pan out, how things are going to work, if you're going to continue to be that same person or not. It's as much about opportunity as it is about having to not only stop living in denial and face up to it and accept that your life's crap and partly it's probably your own fault. Nobody wants to admit that. But it's a step in the right direction because then you're saying to yourself, if I got myself into this, then surely I can get myself out of it, can't I? I led myself, maybe not always intentionally, but just kind of gradually fell into something that you didn't realise you were falling into because it was so subtle and so prolonged that you end up in a place that you start questioning because you don't really fully know what the circumstances and factors are that led you to get there. So it's not always easy to say, oh, this is why I end up here. He's like that because of this. It's not always. I don't think that life's as simple as that. Life is more complicated. It's more nuanced. There's more depth to things than we realise. So in the end, you just say to yourself, there's nothing I can do here to change things. I'm not going to change if I stay here. I'm only going to drag out another couple of years of my life feeling unhappy, unfulfilled, dissatisfied, depressed, moaning, whinging, and just kind of people just spazzing you because of it. People just not wanting to be around because you're such a whingy and whiny little fuck. And I get it, I understand. I completely understand it. I really do. I've been around it. I've been that person. I know what it's like. And I just don't want to be that person, honestly. I don't really like moaning about things, but sometimes you just feel like you have to get things off your chest in some way or other, otherwise you'll just go mad. But ultimately, that whatever that change has to be for you, you have to swallow your pride sometimes and say, I can't continue living down this path because time's running out for me. And I think that's essentially what it comes down to, is that I know that time's running out for me to make a change. I know that I'm technically middle-aged now. I don't feel like it, but I am. and that time's not waiting around for you. It doesn't care, you know, whether you make a change or it doesn't. You know, so you're still gonna reach that 40th mark, 50th, 60th, 70th, 80th mark if you live long enough. So, you know, you've only got so much time left, you know, and probably, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if I have another 35 years. And that's gone by very quickly. I assume, you know, I assure you. But I don't have time to just sit here and keep living this lie, which is what it is. It's a lie. I've been living a lie for so many years. I've been trying to be something for everybody else, and I didn't feel like I could be me. I just felt constantly under pressure, and I've got to put on this performative suit every time I'm out with my partner and her you know, siblings, and just this constant excessiveness of everything, and overindulgence, and just exaggerated mannerisms and behaviours, and I just found it really all exhausting, and I quite frankly don't really want to play a part in any of that anymore. So that's another reason why I'm having to leave next year. I think I've just moved on from it, if I'm honest. I think I just feel like I've moved on, and I've just, you know, I've lived that part of my life. You know, I had that chance. You know, I did the kind of carefree 20s thing. I did, you know, the kind of giving the kind of unorthodox kind of life ago, I suppose you could say. And you know, it works out, but it doesn't work out forever. Unless you've got money, you know, it's like, unless you've got kids over here, you know, you've got nothing holding you down. And so for me, there's no real reason for me to stay here in the long term, as far as I can tell. But what, you know, how that now, whether that means that the partnership comes to an end at some stage, probably will. But, you know, I guess we'll try and stick it out. And because the plan basically is for me just to go back for a few years, just to kind of save up some money and put some money away in my pension. But I just don't know how realistic that all is. You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean, it's not like. I mean, it may end up being just a kind of temporary kind of a gig, because there's a chance that actually I might be able to come over a bit later on, where the financial situation is a bit better. And if that is the case, then I'd be happy to come back, really, I think. But I would have to have something to do, though. That's the only thing. You know, I can't just come back here and not do something. I'd have to. You know, if I'm gonna. I mean, I don't know how. You know. It all just kind of seems maybe a bit naive, really. But there's just nothing. There's nothing I want to do here now. There's nothing. There's no reason for me to be here. I should really be back home right now, and it's sitting in England. If I'm honest, you know, there's no reason for me to stay if I don't have a job and a stable income. You know, I can't justify it to myself to stay any longer than early next year. I just can't do it. It's not fair on my partner. Not just financially speaking, but just psychologically, you know, for my own well-being. I need to feel that I'm in control again. That's what I want. That's what I need. Is that self-control? Is that thing of I'm steering my own ship, not other people. Because I think as a man, it's one of those really taboo things of not wanting to feel emasculated, I guess. It's nobody wants to be seen as being weak and vulnerable and dependent, reliant on others, and I don't want to live like that anymore. I just can't do it anymore. It's not right on all sorts of levels, and I feel extremely guilty about it all the time. And it was just fucking wearing me down. It was just destroying me. It really was destroying me. whatever was left of my self-esteem anyway. It's so I guess it's just really honestly the last few years of my life have just kind of been one long downward spiral into a lot of mess, a lot of problems, a lot of drama, and I'm not proud of it. I really am not. But at least now I kind of almost feel a sense of liberation, if I'm honest. That finally there's a way out of this. There's a pathway, whether we want to say a pathway forward, I don't know. But I think I still have chances, I still have opportunities. And I think that I have to try now in my late 30s to give something a chance, give something a shot. Because once I'm in my 40s, it will get much harder. The older you get, the more age discrimination there is, and don't tell me that there isn't, because there's plenty of it out there. But the younger you are, and I think really in many ways I'm in a good spot in my life in terms of having a certain degree of life experience and maturity, and being relatively kind of sensible, I would say, in some ways. I'm clearly not financially, but anyway, that's something else. But I definitely need to get back into some place where I feel like I have some power of my own life, and I can get some respect back from other people and within myself, where I feel like I've got my independence, that I'm self-reliant, and that I'm doing something that makes a difference, that I'm living a life that I don't mind waking up early for in the morning, that I don't mind stressing out over under the pressure of it, because I like it, because I enjoy it, even though it might be hard. Because there's nothing worse than wasting your life away on people, places, situations, jobs, relationships, friendships that steal years or decades away from your life because you can't get them back. Once all that time's gone, that's it, it's over. And how many people are dying every day with those kind of regrets, that they didn't live their lives, that they didn't fulfill parts of themselves, they didn't do things that they could have done. They had opportunities to do, but threw them away. And I think honestly that's how the last 5 years of my life have been. Just that I just felt like I just threw everything away. Partly because I didn't feel confident or competent enough, but also because I didn't feel that they were really the right fit for me in the end. So I've been stuck in this kind of dilemma, this predicament for a long time, in which I didn't know what to do. It was just, that's all it's really been the last few years. There's just this constant stress, this constant pressure, this constant state of limbo, this no man's land type mental kind of state in which I know that I have to do something, but I don't know what to do. What do I do? How do I navigate this? What's the most logical, practical, sensible, wise thing to do in terms of a change? And that's why it's took me so long, I suppose, to admit that I actually have to put a plan. It's one thing to say, I know I need to change, but then it's another thing to actually put that plan into action, because then something concrete's there and you know that you have to act on it. The worst thing you can do in life is to be in a situation where you don't have to be assertive, where you have no real responsibility or need to be accountable, because that's what robs you of your precious years of your life. Because it's only because of that. It's only because of those things that you do become someone that's worthy of respect, worthy of loyalty, worthy of appreciating. And when you no longer have those things, people just see you as disposable. You don't matter. You're not important. You're not worthy of their attention, their time, their energy, their resources. Not that, not that my life has to be defined by other people, but I'm just saying that, it's nice to have those things. So, I'm going to go in a second here, but I just want to say, look, if you're in that phase of your life, that kind of transition era or period where you just feel stuck and you don't know what to do, you've got to make a decision. You've got to do something. And as simple and as obvious as it is to say that, it's often the very thing that we put off. We just keep putting it off. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. I'll do it next month. I'll do it. Before you know, the time's gone by, and you're saying the same thing that 5 years down the line. And I just think that you just have to have the fucking balls at some point to say, I have to do something now that I don't want to do. I have to do something now because I'm fucking miserable. Really miserable. And I'm making everybody else miserable because of it. And I feel guilty about that. And I'm self-aware of that stuff. I know what that impact of I know I can pick up on vibes around me, I pick up on the way that people look at me. The body language, it's written all over them. And I don't want to feel like I'm in that, I have to constantly be in that hyper-vigilant state of, pleasing everybody else's expectations and having to be overly considerate for everybody else all the time. I don't want to live like that. The way to start feeling happy is by making decisions. People don't change because they get stuck in loops of this anchored dilemma. What if this? What if that? But if I do this, if I do that, I should do that. And so if the buts, the ifs, the what ifs, hows, wheres, whens, whos, they just start. They control you. They take over and they dominate over you and they overwhelm you, and you can't get out of it. So you get stuck. You get stuck being stuck, and you get stuck by the way that you're thinking, you're responding, you're feeling, and so it just becomes this really, really, really seriously vicious cycle in which everything you're doing is contributing to you being as you actually are. It's to feeling the way you do. It's to thinking the way you do. It's to the way that's impacted your life in general. So you have to have all of that, those really deep, talks with yourself and those around you, and say, look, I've tried. I really have tried. I stuck it out. I did what I could. But there are just things that aren't working for me. I know that they're working for you, or you seem to enjoy certain things, so it's different for you. But for me, I'm not a selfish person, but for me, I have to prioritize my own well-being, my own quality of life. I have to somehow define what life means for me. What is it? What is my life? Or what do I want my life to be? What would I be good at? What would be a better situation for me personally at this stage of my life? You almost have to visualize it. You have to write things down. So this is what I want. This is what I'm going to do a year from now, 5 years from now. And again, I'm not saying any of this is easy. I know it's not easy. That's why it took me years to get to this point. But you will feel such a relief when that pressure is finally lifted off of you. When you finally sit down and have that conversation you've been putting off for years. Because that's often all it really comes down to, really. It's just one or two conversations where all the truth comes out, all of the things that you were anxiety ridden over or paranoid about, they have to come out. They have to be said. Because often people are often waiting for you to say it. Because often they don't know all the truth. Or some people will just wait for you to confirm what they assume anyway. So and again that's really, really hard. It's hard to accept as a man. I don't know about as a woman, but certainly as a man, it's hard to accept that you are a failure. You're incompetent. You are not as good as in some way that you would like to be. That your ego got the better of you. That you are your own worst enemy. That you made mistakes that led to the life that you have. Nobody wants to admit that. No man wants to ever say that to himself. And certainly not to those around him, his kids, his wife, his friends. Who likes admitting that they're a failure? Who likes saying, I'm a bum because of this? I'm a mess because of this. I brought this pain and misery and suffering on myself because of me. Who likes to say that? Nobody. That's why we spend years pointing the finger at others, or living in denial, or pretending that we're something we're not. Keep pretending, keeping up, a happy face and pretending and making other people feel comfortable and like everything's wonderful and great, and in reality, behind closed doors, you're fucking sitting in the corner crying to yourself because you're fucking miserable, because your life is shit, and you know it's shit, and you know why it's shit. And while other people can give you advice and be supportive and try and be some kind of a mentor to you, or role model, at the end of the day, it's only when you're truly ready, when you've had such vast amounts of bullshit for so long, that you then you finally just snap at some point. You say, I just physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually even, let's say, just can't go on any second longer living this life, if you can even call it a life. That's the best thing you can possibly do. Once you finally take that decision and mean it when you say it, as I did last night, when you finally have that much needed heart-to-heart conversation that you both know that needs to be had, that one or the other's waiting for the other person to initiate, that's the point when you will then find that pressure, that release happens, because now you know that you're not stuck anymore. You're heading towards something. That something's on the horizon. Because when people feel stuck, when people don't see a way out, then they feel stuck and don't see a way out. And so do you see how it works? No cracks appear in the cycle. No, nothing stops it. Nothing changes it. It just goes round and around and around and around, and it gets bigger and more immersive and all encompassing. It just becomes so the longer that you leave it, the harder it is to change, the harder it is to break out of, the harder it is to accept. No one likes saying I wasted 5, 10, 20, 30 years, 40 years of my life on something that I thought meant something to me, that I thought was this or that and wasn't. Nobody likes admitting that. So the quicker you make that change, the quicker you accept that you need a new reality to work with, the faster you will feel better. The faster or at least, you're heading towards a place that eventually you will start to feel better about. And you'll respect yourself for making that decision 5-10 years down the line. It might be hard in the moment, because all major life decisions, life transitions, changes are hard, all of them. And everybody goes through them in some way or other eventually. Whether it's initiating, the end of your partnership, whether that's breaking up away from certain people, certain friendships, for all sorts of reasons, having to leave your job that you liked but couldn't tolerate anymore. Whether it's having that awkward but needed conversation with your employer, whatever it is, we just get trapped. That's the problem. We get trapped, and because we become unable to be brave, unable to stand up and say, I'm going to take control. I'm going to get back some degree of control over myself and my life. I'm not going to let other people dictate my life. I'm not going to be bogged down any longer by the way I feel. It's about taking accountability over the way you think and the way you feel. Instead of having a very passive relationship with it, you have to twist it to this active, I'm in control here. I can do something about this. I can do something. Because when you believe that you can't, then that is you start to believe it. You get convinced that you can't change, or that I can't do anything, and that's how years or decades of your life go by. And then that shame, the stigma of it all sets in, and it just becomes different layers of toxicity then get built on top of each other. And it's just like I said, the longer you leave it, the harder it will be for you. The moment you stand up and confront the truth, the reality, what's really going on in your life, there's at least a flicker of hope. There's at least a distant lighthouse, on the horizon. There's at least a ship somewhere out there. You just have to find it. You just have to be brave enough to go out there and explore and take a chance. That's what real men do. Real men take chances and opportunities. And what I mean by that is men who fucked up, who failed, who've had multiple times in their lives where they fell into traps, they fell into despair, depression, they fell into endless problems, and they had to dig themselves out of it. And that's where I'm at now. I'm at the phase now where, and I know now I have to now try and make a plan to leave, and then try to work my way out of the mess I've caused myself. Slowly but surely over the next few years. Got to go back, figure out where I'm going to live and all that kind of nonsense. Then I've got to find, got to try and get some kind of work at some stage. I've got to do something to get back on track and save some money, get some savings together. And, I'm just trying to move on with my life and try and undo some of the embarrassment and shame that I've brought upon myself. It's like a race. It's like a racer, a marathon or something. Like where someone trips up and fucks up and fails that round, that one, and then in the next one, they might trip up again, but they keep going, and eventually, you'll get to a point where you don't trip up anymore, or much less anyway. Because the more you do, the more you're going to experience. The more you are going to pick up new life lessons, wisdom, and experiences, and that should help you to. And obviously, The moment you do change, the moment you realise, right, well, I know now about what I don't want. I know that this is not going to bring me any happiness, so I'm not going to go down any routes that are similar to that. You can avoid, now you know what you like. Now you know, or at least, well, you certainly know what you don't like. So I think, it's just better for you to own up and start acting in a way that's, they just fuck everybody else. It doesn't really matter whether other people respect you or not. It matters whether you respect yourself, whether you like yourself anymore, how you feel about yourself, How do you think about yourself? How do you feel about yourself? That's what matters. And that doesn't mean that you have to constantly be smiling and happy all the time. It's about that. It's about the fact that you've got some of your shit together in life. Especially as a man, we like to have our things together. We like to be self-reliant, that people can depend on us, that we've got a certain degree of assertiveness and power and control and, being able to have a little bit of healthy stoicism in us, It's not about being hyper masculine or anything like that, all that kind of garbage, but it's all it is. It's just all that alpha male bullshit, just toxic masculinity, competitive bullshit. But it's just, I think in the end it comes down to how do you want to feel about yourself? If currently you feel like crap, you hate yourself, you can't stand to look at yourself anymore, you'd rather be somebody else or not be here at all, then that things deeper within yourself are completely well and truly fucked. You know it. But at the end of the day, nobody can force you to take that leap of faith and make a change. Nobody can force you to do it, and nobody should force you to do it. At the end of the day, you have to weigh up all of the options. You have to be able to put your pride aside for a second. So even if it brings me shame and embarrassment from other people or within myself, I'd rather at least be able to then say, well, yeah, I was a failure, but at least I stood up and made something count of my life at some point. Even if I wasted years of my life away, I didn't continue to waste my life away. I stood up and I made a choice, I made a decision to stop being like that. Because that's a true mark, in my opinion. That is a true mark of a real man, a real gentleman, is someone who just keeps getting back up again and again and again, no matter how many punches that keep getting thrown that person's way. You've got to find something somewhere at some point to drag you out of the gutter, to drag you out of that pit of endless despair and frustration and misery and self pity and apathy and anger and rage and dysfunctionality and toxicity. You have to, and I don't know, whatever that is, whatever that will be for you or is for you currently, that's your personal unique situation. Mine's different. My life is different to yours. You haven't lived my life. I haven't lived yours. But all I know is the only thing that we can do in the end is to rely on change. And while we fear change, fear is the thing that drives us. Without discomfort, without fear, without without the possibility of things going wrong, we would never make a change. Because I think if we knew that everything was going to be this way, that way, we would never change. We would never evolve. It's the transitions period of one's life is probably the most important phase you'll ever go through. I mean, everything transitions anyway. Everything changes. Everything moves on to something else. Think about the things you've seen in the last 30, 40 years. I mean, let alone the last few centuries, last few thousand years. Everything moves on. People move on. Things change. Life goes on regardless. It'll go on after I'm dead. It'll go after you're dead. It's not about life. It's about you. And what happens in the outside world is what happens to other people around you. That's on them. That's their lives. That. You can only say so much. You can only comfort people so much, and sometimes in the end, some of those things actually end up doing them more harm, because the more you. The problem is the more you support people, the more you comfort people, the less likely they are to change. And I think you have to start feeling that insecurity, that discomfort, that really turbulent nature of your mind and your emotions in relation to other people, to really want to pick up your bags and say, no more of this fucking garbage, no more of this, no fucking more of it, no more, I'm not doing this no more. I don't want to carry on like this anymore. I don't want to continue pretending that I'm happy all the time, because I'm not. I don't want to continue being around you, being around that, being part of this anymore. I want to leave. I want to go somewhere else. I want to do something else. I want to move on. And that's what, that's essentially what my ex did in her life. She basically stays places until she gets bored of them, or whatever the case, and she moves on. That's all she's ever done. That's her entire life, basically. And I get it. I understand it. I don't necessarily blame her. I get it. But anyway, she's a whole of a ball ache of a story. But I do respect her in the sense that at least she's got the bravery, the courage to try new things, to try and to do. And I think that's what I just lacked over the years. I just lost that sense of courage. I lost the ability to keep trying, to do something different, to get out of my comfort zone. And that's what happens. And when you've been out of your comfort zone, when you've been stuck in your comfort zone for so long, it becomes like a magnet. It becomes hard to leave it. It becomes like a source of gravity. It sucks you in, and it won't let go of you. And it's comfort really. You need to have a balance in your life. You have to have comfort and discomfort, that yin and yang thing of a bit of this, a bit of that. You have too much of one side, and it fucks you up. Too much comfort, you never change. Too much discomfort, you become a fucking wreck of a person. Too much discomfort is no good for you, and certainly not too much comfort is no good for you either. So you have to somehow work towards a life where you can find a bit more balance, because I think that's where, I'm not saying being content is the most important thing in life necessarily, but it's just about feeling. It's about a place where you end up, where you're happy being who you are in that moment. Whether you want to call that being content, whether you want to call that happiness, being existentially stable, whatever you want to call it, there comes a point where you, especially as you get older, where you need that. You can't just keep fighting yourself forever, because you're getting older and you don't have the energy for it. So you got to find it while you still can, while you've still got the ability to change. Because as life goes on, that it gets harder to change, because you don't have the same level of passion for life, I would say. Life's still meaningful in some ways, I guess, perhaps, depending on your definitions of meaning. But it comes down to you wanting to. You just have to want better. You have to want better for yourselves. That's what it's about. It's about, can I do better than this? Can I have more? Can Can I achieve something more than I currently have? That's what drives a lot of men. It's that competition with themselves. I need to do better. I should be doing better. I have been better than where I'm at now. I used to be quite, relatively in shape, and now, over 100 kilos now. I used to have friends at one time. I used to go out at one time. I used to do things. I used to like going out, and just whatever you do in life, just don't waste it away. Don't ruin your life. Don't throw away the best years of your life out of stubbornness, because that's what I did. That's the bottom line of it. I got stubborn. I became cowardly, became weak, became vulnerable, and I allowed myself to become like that. That's the truth. That's the awkward, difficult truth of it. I allowed myself to become like that over time. I didn't realize it though. That's the problem. I didn't see it at the time. I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to accept that it was me. I was the one holding me back. Nobody else. Nothing else. It was me. Again, nobody likes to admit it. Nobody likes to say that it's not other people's fault, it was mine, because that's the hardest thing, probably one of the hardest things that we can all do. Because it makes us feel shit, it makes us hate ourselves. But the longer you live without doing that, the more hate that will develop towards yourself. So in the end, you have to say, what do I want? What do I deserve? What can I achieve? What can I do? What is my potential? Like, is this all I want from my life? Or could I be getting something better? Do I deserve better than this? It's not about being positive. It's about wanting more. It's about deserving more out of yourself. It's about you deserving a quality of life that you would be satisfied with, that you would be happy about, at least at times. But only you can do that. Just as only I can get on that plane, my bags and my thoughts and complicated emotional state when I do go back to England, and have to confront the reality that faces me when I go back there. That's what people are scared of, is facing that discomfort of something new, something different, something unfamiliar, something unpredictable. But don't see it so much as failure. See it as an opportunity. See it as, this is a chance for me to get better. This is medicine. This is therapy. This is what I needed. This is what I spent so many years being unhappy about, because I didn't. This is where I should have been years ago. I should have done this years ago, and I knew I should have done it. But life circumstances pushed me in a different direction back then. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say I was in a different phase of my life now. I was a different person back then. I was younger, more naive. I wanted to go and see a bit in the world. I wanted to go and do this, and that's okay. That's fine. But at least when you say that, then it will make you feel better about it, because it's like you're being honest about it. You're being transparent. So that's all I can really say. And I mean for this video to go on, but I'm going to go now. But I've made my decision, and that's final. I am heading home, and we'll see whatever the future brings, and I will have to deal with it as it comes along. And but I know that I'm making the right decision. It's not what I want to do, I admit, but I think in the long term, it's the wisest thing. It's the most sensible thing to do. If other people have, listen to this video and happen to be here and, will living their life, and they're happy, whatever that is for you, then, that's great, wonderful. But not everybody is, not everybody that's sitting on the beach, not everybody that's at the temple or, at some nightclub is who you think they are, is going through what you think they're going through. You don't really know people. You don't know their lives. You don't know their circumstances. You don't know their troubles, and you probably wouldn't want to know. Thank yourself lucky that you are who you are, and that you still have the ability to change if you want to do it. If you want to work on it, you can do it. You can be happy again. But you have to believe that you deserve to be. You have to believe that you deserve to have something better. You have to believe that you do have self-worth, that you are important, that you do have something to offer, that you can be somebody. Because when you start to believe that stuff, then you see that you can change. But the more you keep telling yourself that you've got nothing, that you're not worthy, that you're shit, that you're crap, you're this, that, then you start over time, you just believe that stuff, and that's it, and that becomes your daily talk. It becomes this inner reality of just unhelpful self-talk. Doesn't do anything for you. It's not about being positive so much. It's more about just being honest with yourself, and also being less black and white in your thinking. It's not about being super positive. It's certainly not about being super negative either. So it's you have to find that somewhere in between, that middle point where it's okay, it's not this, but it's not that, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be about thinking positively or thinking negativity. It's about you being able to see that there's a middle ground, that there's a chance for something that's a bit of both, because that's what life is. It's bittersweet. Life's bittersweet in general. Change is bittersweet. Transitions are bittersweet. But what's even bitter, more intensely bitter, is staying stagnant, is never changing, is never growing, is never maturing, is never developing yourself. Because that is a life of misery. So many people are walking around out there that you've no idea about, that have lived the last 30, 40 years, maybe even longer, of a life they didn't want, they didn't enjoy, they didn't like, they regret it, they've got the seething of resentment about. And I think at the end of the day, as much as you might like certain aspects of where you are, who you're around, you really have to have that late night, early morning conversation with yourself and say, I'm comfortable, but I'm not healthy anymore. I'm comfortable, but I'm not a man. I'm not being the kind of person that I see others around me being, and I want to be like. But again, only you can do that. Only I can force myself to put myself into situations that I don't really want to be in, but I know I have to be in for growth to happen. So I'll leave it at that, but I hope you found this video useful. As for what happens to my relationship, which before I go here, I've been saying that a few times now, haven't I? But before I go, as to what happens to my relationship, I don't know. We'll just kind of play it by ear as time goes on. Maybe we can somehow sustain it. I don't know. I'm not being naive. It might not be possible. We'll just have to kind of come to that at the time. But there's just, this is the end of a road. This is the end of a chapter. This is the beginning of the end now of my time here. Well, certainly this stage, this era of my life in Thailand anyway. Whether I come back in the future, I don't know. I'm not sure. We'll see what happens. Or whether Tip comes to live in England at some point, I don't know. But that's my partner's name. I didn't use a surname, but anyway. I don't know how things are going to pan out. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't really have a choice. It's not a choice. It's not the most ideal. It's not exactly the most joyous thing that I've had to confront, but it is what it is. That's life. That's the way it goes. Unfortunately, my life's never really been simple anyway. It's always been a bit of a clusterfuck. So it's going back. It's going back to go forwards, as far as I can tell. I hope anyway. I don't think you can get possibly any lower than I've been the last few months. And that's why I have to change, because I just can't tolerate living in this constantly bleak emotional world that I've been carrying for so long now. I just can't. I can't do it anymore. So I have to break out of it. Okay, so that's enough of that. I'm sorry it was a long video. I hope it's been useful for you in some way or other. And I will see you very soon, I hope. Take care now. I'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye.